Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into the 2025 government budget. It's a big one, promising help for people right now, but also some major long-term shifts for the UK economy. So, let's get into it.
All right, so let's jump right in. The economy is facing some pretty serious headwinds, right? So the government has laid out this big financial roadmap. And the question on everyone's mind is, where exactly is this road supposed to be taking us?
Okay, first things first. To really get a grip on why the government's making these specific tax and spending choices, we've got to understand the economic picture they're looking at.
Right, and this is a big deal. The OBR, that's the Office for Budget Responsibility. They're the independent watchdog. They've actually downgraded their forecast for how much the economy is going to grow. And look, this isn't just some small adjustment. It's a pretty major revision, and it has a huge knock-on effect for everything the government wants to spend money on.
And here's what that looks like in pounds and pence. That downgrade we just talked about, it blows a £16 billion hole in the government's future income. I mean, that is a massive shortfall they now have to plug somehow.
Now, this chart really puts things into perspective. It shows a problem that's been brewing for a long time. For 30 years, the UK has been at the bottom of the G7 pack when it comes to investment. And that history of underinvestment, well, it's a huge piece of the puzzle when you're trying to figure out why the UK's productivity has been struggling.
Okay, so that's the gloomy backdrop. Now let's switch gears and look at what the government is doing to help people with the cost of living pressures that, let's be honest, pretty much everyone is feeling right now.
So the budget includes this whole package of measures aimed at easing those everyday costs. You've got a one-year freeze on regulated rail fares, which is good news for commuters. Prescription charges are frozen too. For anyone with a car, that 5p fuel duty cut is being extended. And on the flip side, for what's coming in, the national living wage is getting a boost, and the state pension triple lock is staying put.
And what's really important to understand here is that this isn't just about giving people a bit of short-term help with their bills. There's a double whammy effect they're going for. The government says these measures are also designed to help bring down the headline rate of inflation. So, two goals in one. But of course, none of this is free, right? Someone's got to pay for it. And that brings us to the next big chapter of the budget, some pretty significant tax reforms, all framed under this idea of making the system fairer. And a key part of that is a brand new property tax. The official name is the High-Value Council Tax Surcharge, which is a bit of a mouthful. Let's be real, everyone's just going to call it the mansion tax. And as the name suggests, it's aimed squarely at the most valuable homes in England.
So how does it actually work? Well, as you can see here, it's a tiered system. Basically, the more your house is worth, the more you pay, starting at $2,500 for homes over £2 million and going all the way up to $7,500 for those over $5 million.
Now, the government's argument for this is all about fairness. They point to this really weird quirk in the current system where, because the council tax bands are so outdated, you can have a mega mansion in London paying less in council tax than a typical family home somewhere else. This new tax is designed to fix that. But, as you'd expect, not everyone is on board. There's some pushback, with groups like the Homeowners Alliance asking some pretty tough practical questions. They're basically saying, hold on, you need to revalue millions of homes to make this work. Can you actually pull that off cleanly and on time? It's a fair question.
The mansion tax is getting the headlines, but there are other important tax changes tucked away in here too. First, they're freezing personal tax thresholds all the way to 2031. This is something called fiscal drag. It's a bit of a stealth tax really because as your pay goes up with inflation, you can get pushed into a higher tax bracket without actually being any better off. They're also capping some tax relief you can get on pensions and cutting back on a specific tax break for business owners who sell their company to their employees.
All right, moving on from tax, let's talk about welfare and public services. This is another area where we're seeing some pretty big shakeups. And the headline grabber here is a really significant one. The government is bringing in a policy change that they say will lift 450,000 children out of poverty. I mean, that's a huge number.
So how are they going to do that? Simple. They're scrapping the two-child limit in universal credit. This has been a really controversial policy that, up until now, has meant families don't get certain benefits for their third or subsequent children.
But again, this costs money. So to pay for it, they're making savings elsewhere. That includes things like reforming the tax reliefs for the mobility scheme for disabled people, and also getting tougher on fraud and error in the system, which they say will involve more face-to-face health assessments. And it's not just the welfare budget. There's a big push for efficiency savings across all government departments. We're talking about a target of almost £5 billion in annual savings by 2030. That's a lot of money to find.
Okay, so for our final section, let's zoom out a bit and look at the long-term vision. What is the government doing to try and build a stronger economy for the future? This timeline lays out some of the big, long-term projects getting the green light. You've got a new road tax coming in for electric vehicles. That's to replace the fuel tax revenue that's disappearing. We're also seeing a rollout of 120 new neighborhood health centers and a firm target for getting that third runway at Heathrow up and running.
And behind these projects, there's some serious cash. We're talking big targets for building new homes, major funding for new nuclear power stations like Sizewell C, over £22 billion a year for research and development. The list goes on. And remember that productivity problem we talked about right at the start? Well, all of this investment is designed to try and finally fix it.
So if you take one thing away from this whole budget, it's this. It's a balancing act. It's about trying to give people help with their bills right now while also making some tough decisions on taxes and reforms that are meant to get the economy and the public finances on a stronger footing for the long haul.
Look, this budget definitely sets out a clear path. It makes some bold, and for some, controversial choices. But with that tricky economic forecast hanging over everything, the big question, the one we won't know the answer to for a while, is this. Will it actually be enough to build that stronger, fairer economy everyone wants to see?